In the 80s, there was a bassist that could keep up with one of the fastest guitarists on the planet. And no, I'm not talking about Billy Sheehan. At least, not this time. That guitarist was the legendary Paul Gilbert. An incredible musician and without a doubt one of the fastest and cleanest guitarists on the 80s shred scene. I also had the privilege of playing with him in 2019. Oh my god. As you probably know, Paul Gilbert has had a brilliant career with Mr. Big and as a solo artist. But in this video, we're focusing on the band that put him on the map, Racer X. And specifically, I'm gonna talk about their bassist. A bassist who, in my opinion, has never been given enough credit, Juan Alderete. Together, we'll explore why Juan is a unique bassist, capable of following Paul Gilbert's lightning-fast picking with surgical precision, then seamlessly adapting his playing to completely different bands and musical styles without ever losing his own voice. And above all, we'll try to answer the question: how the hell is this even playable? Salve and welcome to my channel. I am Matteo Bertoldi, a musician, teacher, and I play the big guitar. If you want to explore the world of the electric bass, its history, its legends, and if you're trying to improve your playing, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Now, get comfortable, make yourself a hot cup of tea, grab some popcorn, or a pizza if you're Italian, or the Ninja Turtles, and let's get started with the video. First, let's take a step back in time. California, mid-80s. MTV rules the world, and hard rock is living its golden age. But in the clubs of Los Angeles, something strange is happening. It's no longer enough to write a great song. You have to play faster than light itself. It's the rise of guitar heroes. It's the birth of shred bands. Shred is an extreme style of guitar playing that pushes speed, technique and precision to the limit. At the heart of the 1980s shred scene was producer Mike Varney, who, through his label Shrapnel Records, launched many of the genre's leading figures, including Yngwie Malmsteen, Jason Becker and Marty Friedman with Cacophony, Richie Kotzen, and, of course, Paul Gilbert. But while guitarists were cramming as many notes as they could into every bar, what happened to the bassists? The way things were mixed back in the day didn't help. Record productions often rolled off the low frequencies to make room for walls of distorted guitars and huge reverb-soaked snare drums. Most of the time, bassists were expected to play a little more than quarter or eighth notes, following the roots and fading into the background. But not everyone was willing to accept that role. This was the environment that gave birth to Racer X. The band was formed in Los Angeles in 1985 by 19-year-old Paul Gilbert and our protagonist Juan Alderete, both students at the Guitar Institute of Technology. The original lineup was completed by Eric Chesser on drums and Jeff Martin on vocals. By the time of the band's second album, the one we'll be focusing on, Scott Travis had replaced Chesser on drums, while Bruce Bouillet joined as the band's second guitarist, helping shape the iconic dual guitar sound Racer X became known for. I remember like it was yesterday when I first heard them. It must have been 3-4 days ago. Riesco a star serio, non è che è morto, eh.
Okay.
I was saying, the first time I heard them, I had to stop for a second because my brain was completely overstimulated, like I just had 10 espressos in a row. And yes, for us Italians, I'm Italian, espresso is like a unit of measurement. Over the years, I've also spent time digging into some of their bass parts for myself and for my students, including the track I'll talk about later, as well as technical difficulties, which I covered in a video and even performed live at 2022 Padova Guitar Show with these guys. Now, going back to the 10 espressos moment, what really blew me away was that in all of that madness of supersonic guitars and pounding double bass drums, The bass stood out with surgical precision and elegance, hitting me like a truck on the highway. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to talk about him. Juan Alderete de la Peña was born in Los Angeles on September 5, 1963, into a Mexican-American family, and he was the fourth of 5 children. He grew up listening to a lot of jazz and progressive rock at home, bands like Yes, Rush and King Crimson, and picked up the bass at 16, inspired by legends like Jaco Pastorius, Geddy Lee, and Stanley Clarke. He graduated from GIT, where he met Paul Gilbert, and later formed Razor X with him, launching his professional career.
And I will always be incredibly thankful to Juan Alderete, who was the bass player of Razor X. He was a student at the same time I was, and he was much more of a go-getter than I was. You know, I was happy to sit in my room, like, we're not ready, we need to rehearse 10,000 more hours. And John came back one day and he was like, I booked a gig, I'm tired of waiting around. I'm like, really? And you know, we're not ready. He's like, I don't care, we're ready enough. And so he booked us a gig. It was Razor X back in you know, 85 or something. And we did the gig and it was fine. You know, it wasn't perfect, but it was good enough. And the next gig was better. And without that, I might have just, you know, procrastinated forever.
Although he wasn't originally from the metal scene, his solid technical foundation allowed him to keep up with Paul Gilbert's supersonic rhythms, while also serving as the band's day-to-day manager. After the band broke up, Alderete expanded his musical horizons, first joining the rock band The Scream, and later finding his greatest international success with the Mars Volta in 2003. With this iconic progressive and psychedelic rock band, he recorded albums such as Francis the Mute and even won a Grammy Award in 2009 for the song Wax Simulacra.
Viva Mexico!
Over the years, Juan has continuously reinvented himself, moving between, sorry I have to read, experimental rock, electronic music, underground hip-hop, and alternative rap. Me coglioni. His resume includes projects such as Big Sur, Vato Negro, Deltron 3030, Dr. Octagon, and Hollow Orbit. Then, in 2017, he joined Marilyn Manson as his touring bassist. In short, the variety of sounds in Juan's discography is incredible. I really recommend you to check out all these bands. You will find all the links in the description. If there's one thing that I truly believe, and I always try to teach to my students, is the importance of being versatile and keeping an open mind, both in what you listen to and in the techniques and styles you learn. Well, Juan Alderete is the perfect example of that. Throughout his career, he's always been able to adapt to different musical situations, using fingerstyle, pick, slap, tapping, experimenting with effects and different basses, even fretless ones. And now, let's go back to the 80s and dive into their most iconic track, in my opinion, the final boss of Second Hit, Scarified. This song was born from Scott Davis' iconic double bass drum pattern, which inspired Paul Gilbert to come up with that insane guitar riff.
He was playing it in rehearsal one day, and I came in and thought, that's the coolest drum thing I've ever heard.
And with all that going on, what do you think the bass is doing? Long notes? 8 notes?
Slap.
Doubling the guitar riff? No, wait. That was actually the right one. Now you might be thinking, well, it's not the first time the bass has doubled the guitar. True, but this is the riff. No objections? Makes sense. Actually, getting a reply right now would be kinda creepy, since I'm alone here. Anyway, back to the bass part. You heard that right. Juan locks in with the guitars, playing this riff exactly note for note, and even adds short solos without taking a break until the very end. You're probably wondering how that's possible. Well, that's exactly why I'm here. This song is really a challenge to play. We have the main riff, the bass solos we'll look at later, the fast 16th note section where the bass follows the guitar harmonies, and the guitar solos section, the only moment where we can relax a little bit. Scarified is in the key of F minor, but the instruments are tuned a half step down, so we start on the 2nd fret of the E string, which is supposed to be F sharp. So from now on, to make things easier, let's just pretend we're in F sharp minor. Okay. Now I definitely need a bass. The main riff follows an A-B-A-C structure. Each section is 2 bars long. The first bar is always the same, the difference is in the 2nd bar. The A section goes like this. Wait, now I should say something about my playing. I started using 3 fingers from the very beginning, so I never really built up so much speed with 2. And I think if I tried to play this song with 2 fingers, maybe I could keep up for a couple of bars, but after that I would need a wrist transplant. So I will play this riff that way that has become more natural to me over the years. And this is important. Technique is not what it's all about. It's just a tool. The goal is not to play like Juan Alderete, but to find the best way to express yourself. That said, if you're also looking for a way to develop your 3-finger plucking technique without starting from scratch, I've included some exercises and materials that I use and I also recommend to my students in the description below. Maybe they can be useful. Grazie prego. Getting back to this section, it starts with 16th notes on F sharp. Then it moves into this portion of the scale with a fairly tricky 16th note triplet following the bass drum. And then it ends on the 1st note again. Then, to close out section A, he plays an ascending scale in the relative major box, starting from the root. Here we can find the 16th note triplet as well. The B section starts the same way, and then he plays a descending scale starting from D, 7th fret on the G string. Basically the whole vertical box without missing a note. And then it ends on F sharp again. Now the whole B section. Consider that to better understand what I'm talking about, you should be familiar with the positions of the model scales on 4 strings. Moving on, there's a repeat of section A and then it ends with section C, which includes another ascending scale starting from the perfect 5th, which is C sharp, still on the E string. This time the whole scale is made of 16th note triplets. To get this riff right, you should keep these things in mind. First, economy of motion. Your right hand, or plucking for the left-handed players out there, should barely leave the strings. Keep your finger movements as small as possible and stay relaxed. Second, fretting hand fingering. There are no shortcuts here. You really need to use all 4 fingers. Also, notice that Juan wears his bass quite high, which gives him more room to stretch his hand. Third, coordination. To get that clean sound, both hands need to be perfectly in sync. The best way to develop that is to practice slowly before increasing the tempo. But I know that you know that, right? Right? And last but not least, the tone. To get closer to Juan's sound, use the bridge pickup and keep your plucking hand in this position to get the most out of it. I think you can clearly hear Jaco Pastorio's influence here. In this context, the tone, combined with his excellent control of dynamics, gives the bass a unique and elegant sound. I've put together a free PDF with specific exercises to help you play this song, and of course you can download it from the link in the description. Now you might think technique is the final boss of this song. You sure about that? I mean, maybe for you it really is, but Just imagine staring at a blank page and having to compose this entire piece from nothing. And that's where our now friends Racer X showcase true mastery of another fundamental aspect of music: harmony. In this song we find chromatic bass passages following the diminished chords played by the guitars, used in place of dominant chords to create more tension. Dominant chords are chords like this one or this one, even this one. No, my bad, wrong slide. Basically, a dominant chord is a major triad with a minor 7. You'll naturally find one on the 5th degree of a major or minor key, the primary dominant, but they can also be built on the 5th degree of any other chord, in which case they are called secondary dominants. Now, if we extend these chords by adding a flat 9th, a note that's a semitone above the octave, and then remove the root, voila! We end up with a diminished chord built on the 3rd, which creates the same tension and resolves in exactly the same way. In this piece, the substituted chords are B7 flat 9 for the D sharp diminished, which is a secondary dominant, and C sharp 7 flat 9 for the E sharp diminished, the primary dominant, which then resolves to F sharp minor, the tonic chord. In other words, we're back home. The next section is an intentional tribute to Johann Christoph Friedrich Bach Harpsichord Concerto in A major. And once you hear this part, I think the reference becomes pretty obvious. Harmonically, it follows a circle of 4th progression. We start on the tonic and then move up by a 4th each time, passing through the key's diatonic chords. Here the bass follows a very specific pattern in which it plays the root of the chord followed by its first inversion. Inverting a chord doesn't change what the chord is, it just changes the bass note, giving it a different feel. In this case, it's combined with the root position to add a bit more movement. I have to admit that I had to transcribe the guitar arpeggios to really understand what was going on. Another interesting thing is the modulation into the guitar solo. After the main dominant C sharp, the harmony moves to D sharp, which works as a secondary dominant, before resolving to the new key G sharp minor. At the same time, the guitars move between D sharp major and G sharp minor, creating a nice tension that feels a bit unstable, but still smooth and effective. The modulation is handled very well. The last part is in G sharp minor, and the solo starts on E, the 6th degree of the key, played on the open string. This may be the reason why the whole song is tuned half step lower, I suppose. I mean, it makes sense. And here we are at the part many of you were probably waiting for, the bass solos. These aren't really bass solos. I mean, we can talk about that, but I consider it more like short phrases in response to the guitar arpeggios, just so the bass doesn't get left out of the conversation. In my opinion, they help enhance the song's neoclassical feel in terms of phrasing. In fact, if you imagine a cello instead of the bass, especially in the first solo, it becomes pretty clear that's exactly what they were going for. Here he plays a sequence of arpeggios over an F sharp minor chord. They are actually a blend of F sharp minor 7, D major and B minor 7, gradually raising the starting note before resolving to the tonic. Despite the different arpeggios, he is clearly outlining the F sharp minor chord tones. It starts from the minor 7th, then from the minor 3rd, from the perfect 5th, and it resolves to the tonic. Each note is accented and lands on the down beats, beat 1 and beat 3 of the first and also of the second bar. Remember that the use of raking in the descending passages is extremely important. In the second solo there is a very fast scale moving through this F-sharp minor box here. I will show you the way I transcribed it, but of course you can find some alternatives if you need to. In terms of accents, they're more irregular here, sometimes falling on the downbeat and other times on the offbeat. Cool, isn't it? What you just heard is a bass and guitar unison using the tapping technique. The idea is simple. We take 3 6-note shapes on 2 strings corresponding to F-sharp minor, E mixolydian, and D Lydian. From here we will play the same pattern across all 3 positions. The pattern is this one. Hold down the lowest note of each position with your left index finger, then tap the 3rd note with your right index finger. Move upward, which plucks the string and triggers the lower note, then perform a hammer-on like this, and finally play all 3 notes from highest to lowest. As I was saying, let's repeat the same pattern on all the positions, starting from the D string, then G string, moving to E mixolydian, G string, D Lydian, G string, again, and at the end we have the same pattern again, this time just on the G string, starting from C sharp, then A and B, to close it we start from C sharp, then B, and a little slide up to C sharp again. So this is the whole part. Easy, right? No, actually not. But it's fun. Well, now there would have been an ending clip for this chapter, which I forgot to record. So now I have to do the voiceover. That's great. Anyway, I think tapping really deserves its own episode. Over the years I've collected a lot of exercises and ideas on this technique, and I'm thinking about doing a more in-depth video on it. If you're interested, let me know in the comments. If you've made it this far, you've probably realized we are talking about a truly special musician. Someone who has always looked beyond the obvious and never stayed in a single role. In short, a career with no limits or barriers, a life of freedom. But unfortunately, as we all know, life can be cruel and unpredictable. On January 13, 2020, Juan was riding his bike not far from home. Although he was wearing a helmet and full protective gear, the crash was very serious and caused a severe brain injury. Juan immediately fell into a deep coma that lasted 4 weeks, leaving his wife Anne and fans around the world in painful uncertainty. No one knew if he would survive, or if he would ever be himself again. Against all medical odds, Juan opened his eyes at the end of February. For months, he went through hours of therapy every day. Imagine someone that had played on stages all over the world and trained his body to do incredible things, now having to relearn the simplest tasks, like speaking, walking, and regaining control of his body. In the United States, healthcare costs are extremely high. And this is where you can see the impact that an artist can have on people. His community came together with a huge wave of support. Colleagues and fans donated whatever they could. Paul Gilbert, his longtime bandmate in Racer X, even sold one of his rare guitars to help him. Do you think an accident like this could stop a musician of his caliber? I don't think so. In fact, in September of the same year, Juan did what everyone had hoped for. He picked up his bass again. His hands were shaking, but his musical instinct and his memory were still there. The instrument was no longer just a piece of wood with strings and electronics. It has become his main source of healing. Touring the world, unfortunately, became too difficult to sustain, but Juan never stopped making music. He recorded bass parts for Marilyn Manson, continued working remotely on his own projects, and remained an important figure for the Mars Volta. Then, in July 2025, came a moment that moved everyone. Juan decided to open an online store to sell over 700 items from his personal collection, built over a 40-year career. Historic bass guitars, vintage amplifiers, and hundreds of rare effect pedals. Behind this difficult decision were practical reasons, including medical expenses and limited space at home. But above all, it came from a place of love. Juan himself said that this gear shouldn't just sit unused. It should be put back in the hands of musicians who will actually use it and make music with it again. The first time I saw this video, I was deeply touched. Seeing an artist and collector give away pieces of himself to support the work of other musicians really hit me. But more than anything, in the age of social media, where we all try to look perfect and beyond criticism, I think that showing vulnerability is priceless. Well, we've reached the end of this video, so thank you to everyone who made it this far, but above all, thank you, Juan, for everything you've done, for everything you're still doing, and for the great example you set. At the beginning of this video, I asked if this kind of stuff was even humanly playable. The answer is yes. But it takes years of work, a method, a lot of patience, and a bass guitar, of course. I think Juan's most important lesson isn't about speed or technique. It's the ability to keep learning, reinvent yourself, and get back up, even when life throws obstacles in your way. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel. Here, we're always trying to understand not just how to play, but also what we can learn from the musicians we admire. And if you want to work on your technique, go deeper into the topics we covered today, or just download some free material, you will find everything down here. So goodbye, see you soon, arrivederci. I'm going back to practice now. I set myself a challenge. I need to figure out how to play it with just 2 fingers.
After that, my guess is you'll never hear from him again.